Before we begin today's story, I'd like to say a quick prayer for you, my dear family. May your days be filled with peace, your heart with joy, and your steps guided by light. Amen. If you're happy to be here, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a story. Rain swept across the tall windows of the Williams estate, silver streaks racing each other down panes of imported glass. Clara Williams stood in the quiet drawing room, her hand resting lightly on the curve of her stomach. The storm outside had a voice, an unrelenting chorus of thunder and water. But inside, silence pressed like velvet against the walls. She had grown accustomed to silences like these, silences that stretched between her and John like oceans. Once in their early years, the mansion had been filled with laughter, their laughter. Now it seemed the walls only remembered echoes, and Clara sometimes wondered if houses, like people, could forget the sound of joy. The chandelier above flickered as lightning cracked across the horizon. Its glow caught her reflection in the tall mirror, a woman of 29, with chestnut hair cascading in waves over a pale silk dress, her eyes the color of storm clouds themselves. To the world, Clara was the picture of wealth and elegance, the wife of John Williams, one of the most successful businessmen in the country, a woman draped in privilege. But in her reflection, Clara saw something no jewels could disguise: fear. She pressed her palm harder against her stomach. The child moved, faint but undeniable. Each flutter sent a new rush of questions through her veins. Would John embrace this life growing inside her with the same warmth she secretly longed for? Or would the truths she carried shatter everything? The clock struck 8. Its chime reverberated in the hollow quiet. Clara turned from the window, her thoughts slipping back to the sterile hospital corridors and the doctor's grave face just 2 days ago. She remembered the ultrasound room clearly, white walls humming with fluorescent light, the faint buzz of the machine filling the silence as the probe traced across her skin. She had expected joy, the kind of joy she had rehearsed in her mind for months. She had imagined John's arm around her shoulder, imagined their hands clasping together in wonder. Instead, she had been alone, and the doctor's silence had not been the reverent kind. Dr. Everett had squinted at the screen, his brows furrowing as though the grainy black and white image had spoken a secret to him alone. His gloved hand froze mid-motion. Clara had tried to laugh it off. Is something wrong? Is it just the angle? But his expression had remained unreadable, his mouth tightening before words escaped in a low, deliberate tone. Mrs. Williams, he had said, voice carrying a strange weight. When your husband sees this, when he knows you must prepare yourself. Those words had haunted her for nights. He had never explained further. He had only shaken his head, as though saying more would cross a line he dared not cross. Yet the warning had been planted, sharp as glass in her chest. When your husband knows, divorce. Clara closed her eyes now, pressing back tears that threatened to rise. John had not yet asked her about the appointment. He had been away at the company's New York headquarters, orchestrating a deal that would only strengthen his empire. He lived in a world of numbers, contracts, and power plays, while she lived in a world of secrets and shadows. The child within her moved again. She swallowed. Would John's world have room for this life? Would it have room for her if truths came to light? A clap of thunder rattled the windows, and Clara turned sharply, her pulse racing. The storm's violence echoed the storm within her. She moved toward the writing desk, pulling a sheet of cream paper toward her trembling fingers. If her grandmother had been alive, she would have told Clara what she had always told her as a child. Write it down, Clara. When words choke you, let the page carry them. So Clara wrote, her pen scratched across the page, her hand moving quickly as though confession could calm her heart. John, there are things I need to tell you, things I fear you may never forgive. I wonder if love can survive when truth breaks it open. I wonder if your eyes will see me the way they once did, or if you will see only betrayal where I meant to give life. Her breath hitched. She stopped writing, her hand hovering above the page. To write more would be to risk everything. To stay silent would be to drown slowly in her own fears. The ink on the page glistened, wet in the lamplight. She folded the letter, slid it into the drawer of the desk, and locked it away. A letter never sent, words never spoken. Behind her, lightning illuminated the room once more, her shadow stretching tall across the wall. She stared at it for a long moment, at the silhouette of a woman who looked whole, but inside felt fractured. And somewhere in the distance beyond the storm, she thought she heard the echo of the doctor's voice again. A warning, a prophecy, one that would soon reach John Williams, one that would change everything. The private jet descended through a veil of rain, the runway lights of Oak Ridge Airport gleaming faintly against the storm-tossed night. John Williams leaned back in his leather seat, the untouched glass of scotch trembling slightly with the turbulence. He had built his empire by mastering storms, economic downturns, hostile takeovers, boardroom battles. But the weather outside tonight was a reminder that some forces remained beyond even his control. At 41, John carried success like armor. Tall, broad-shouldered, with sharp features that seemed carved for the covers of magazines. He was both admired and envied. Business reporters called him relentless, visionary, ruthless when necessary. But those who truly knew him, few as they were, understood the loneliness behind the steel. The cabin light glinted off his wedding band as he reached for the scotch, swirling it absently. Clara's face flickered in his mind. He had been gone for nearly a week. Meetings, negotiations, a billion-dollar deal in the works. He had given her wealth, comfort, security. Yet he sometimes wondered if he had taken away the one thing a marriage needed most: presence. The jet touched down smoothly, and within the hour his chauffeur was navigating the slick roads toward the Williams estate. The city skyline, alive with lights and restless energy, gave way to quieter stretches of countryside until finally the iron gates of his home loomed ahead. But instead of heading inside, John gave an instruction that surprised even himself. "Take me to Dr. Everett's clinic." The driver glanced back in the mirror. "At this hour, sir?" "Yes," John said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Call ahead. Tell him it's urgent." Something had been tugging at John since Clara's last appointment. She hadn't spoken much about it. Her answers had been vague, her eyes evasive. John's instincts in business had saved him countless times. Those same instincts now told him something had shifted, something important. The clinic was quiet when he arrived, the storm outside still raging. Dr. Everett, a man in his late 50s with silver hair and a grave manner, stood waiting in his office. The walls smelled faintly of antiseptic and paper, the ticking of a clock filling the silence. "Mr. Williams," Everett greeted, shaking his hand firmly. His eyes, however, betrayed something more, a hesitation, almost a burden. "Forgive the hour," John said, taking a seat opposite him. "But I need to hear everything about Clara's ultrasound. She hasn't told me much, and I can sense," he paused, searching the doctor's unreadable expression, "that there's something I should know." Everett folded his hands, his gaze steady yet weighted. "Your wife is healthy. The child is healthy. Physically, everything appears as it should. Then why the hesitation?" John's voice was calm, but beneath it simmered the steel that had intimidated countless rivals. The doctor exhaled slowly, as though preparing to cross a line. "Because sometimes what a scan reveals is not just health. It is truth." He leaned forward. "Mr. Williams, I don't say this lightly. You may need to reconsider the foundation of your marriage. You may need to think of divorce." The word landed like a blade between them. For a long moment, John said nothing. Divorce. It was a word foreign to his vocabulary, a word that belonged to men who failed to hold their worlds together. His jaw tightened, but his voice remained level. Explain. Everett hesitated, his eyes flickering to the ultrasound images laid neatly in a folder on his desk. The child's development indicates conception dates that do not align with your presence. Biologically, the timing raises questions. The silence in the office thickened. Outside, thunder cracked, as though the heavens themselves had punctuated the doctor's words. John's grip tightened on the arm of his chair. His mind replayed the calendar of the past months, business trips, late nights, absences. Clara's soft excuses, her silences. The doctor's voice lowered. I shouldn't interfere in personal matters, but I've seen what secrets do to families. I've seen men destroyed by truths they ignored. If I were in your place, I would demand answers. And if those answers confirmed suspicion, I would end it. John rose slowly, his shadow stretching long across the sterile floor. His face betrayed nothing, yet inside his chest, a storm raged fiercer than the one outside. Thank you, doctor, he said at last. His tone clipped. I'll take it from here. As he left the clinic, rain lashed against his coat, the storm swallowing him whole. The chauffeur opened the car door, but John paused before entering, staring at the dark sky. Divorce. The word replayed, relentless. But beneath it, another word stirred, one far more dangerous. Betrayal. And yet, even as fury threatened to rise, another thought pierced through. Clara's face when she laughed, the way her hand had trembled the first time she placed it in his. The nights they had shared when the world had seemed simple. The storm howled around him, but John's expression remained unreadable as he stepped into the car. Home, he ordered. But home would not be the same. Not now. The grandfather clock in the hall struck midnight, its chimes echoing like distant bells of warning. Clara sat curled on the velvet sofa of the drawing room, the storm outside a steady percussion against the windows. The fire in the hearth had long since dimmed to embers, but she made no move to rekindle it. Instead, her gaze remained fixed on the dark glass of the window, where every flash of lightning illuminated her reflection. A pale face, wide eyes, lips pressed together in restless silence. She knew he would come tonight. She had felt it all evening, as surely as she felt the child stirring within her. John always came home after a deal was won. The world might have known him as a ruthless businessman, but Clara knew the signs. The tension that pulled him away would always bring him back eventually. Only this time he would not return unchanged. Her hand drifted instinctively to her stomach. The secret she carried was no longer one she could contain with silence. Each day it grew heavier, each movement of the baby inside her a reminder that time was running out. The faint sound of tires on wet gravel reached her ears. Headlights swept briefly across the tall windows, casting long shadows across the walls. Clara rose quickly, smoothing her dress, her pulse fluttering in her throat. The front doors opened with their familiar groan, and the storm outside spilled into the marble foyer for a brief moment before the heavy would seal shut again. Clara, her name, spoken in John's deep, controlled voice, filled the silence. He stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his coat, his dark hair damp against his forehead. He looked every bit the powerful figure the world knew, tall, commanding, his features sharpened by fatigue and something harder, colder. But his eyes, always his eyes, betrayed more than he ever intended. Tonight, they carried a weight she had never seen before. "You're home," she said softly, her voice a fragile thread. John studied her for a long moment before removing his coat and handing it to the waiting maid. His gaze never left Clara's face. It was as though he was searching her, peeling back every layer, hunting for truths hidden beneath her calm exterior. "How was New York?" she asked, forcing composure into her tone. "The deal is done." His answer was clipped, dismissive. His usual pride in victory seemed absent. replaced by something she could not name. She gestured toward the sofa. "Come, you must be tired. I'll have tea brought in." "No." The single word froze her in place. John stepped closer, the firelight catching the hard line of his jaw. "Clara, I visited Dr. Everett tonight." Her breath caught for a heartbeat. The room seemed to tilt, the ground unsteady beneath her. She fought to keep her face still, but her hand instinctively tightened against her stomach. "What did he say?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. John's silence stretched between them, heavy as stone. He stood tall, his hands clasped behind his back, like a man accustomed to delivering verdicts. But when he finally spoke, his voice carried a quieter force, the kind that made her tremble more than anger ever could. "He told me I should divorce you." The words shattered through the room like glass breaking. Clara's lips parted, her body stiffening as though the air had been knocked from her lungs. She searched his face for a trace of jest, of misunderstanding, but there was none. His eyes were steady cold, yet behind them flickered a storm she recognized too well. "Divorce?" she echoed, her voice trembling. Why would he say that?" John stepped closer. "That's what I'd like you to explain." Clara swallowed hard, her mind racing. She could deny it. She could cling to silence, but the truth pressed against her ribs, begging to be released. The child within her moved again, a cruel reminder that lies would only delay the inevitable. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. "Secrets rot in the dark, Clara. Bring them to the light, or they will consume you." Tears burned at the corners of her eyes as she met John's gaze. "John, I need you to understand. This child, this life inside me, it is innocent. Whatever doubts the doctor put in your mind, this child should not pay the price." John's jaw clenched. "Answer me plainly. Am I the father?" The storm outside roared, thunder shaking the windows as though the heavens themselves demanded her confession. Clara's lips trembled. She opened her mouth, but no words came. John turned sharply, striding toward the window, his reflection fractured in the rain-streaked glass. His shoulders were rigid, his fists tightening at his sides. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the storm and Clara's uneven breath. Finally, his voice came, low and dangerous. "I've built my life on loyalty, on trust. Betrayal is the one currency I will not tolerate. Tell me the truth, Clara, before the storm takes the choice away from you." Clara's tears spilled freely now, her hands cradling her stomach as though shielding the life within from the weight of his words. She drew a shuddering breath, knowing that whatever she spoke next would determine not only her future, but the future of the child who kicked gently against her palm. She closed her eyes, and with the storm raging outside, Clara Williams finally spoke the words that would unravel everything. Clara's lips parted, but only a sob escaped. The storm outside pressed against the glass, the thunder echoing like a drumbeat of judgment. John's silhouette loomed near the window, his figure rigid against the flickering light of the hearth. "I asked you a question," he said, his voice low but edged with steel. "Am I the father of that child?" The words burned her, but still she could not force the truth from her lips. Instead, her mind unraveled into memories, moments that returned unbidden, weaving together the tapestry of her guilt. It had been late spring, when the world outside their estate was in bloom, but inside, her heart had felt barren. John had been gone for weeks, consumed by his empire, while she wandered the hollow halls alone. The mansion's luxury was a gilded cage, and every corner reminded her of absence. That was when Daniel entered her life, a name she hadn't spoken aloud in months, a name she barely dared to think. He had been kind in ways John no longer had time to be, offering laughter when she felt invisible, gentleness when she was starved for touch. What began as conversation over charity events and fleeting visits to the library had spiraled into something more dangerous. A stolen moment, a kiss that should never have happened, and then a night that could never be erased. She had told herself it was loneliness, a mistake carved from desperation. But mistakes have consequences. Consequences that now stirred within her, heartbeat against heartbeat. Her vision blurred with tears as the memory faded. She clutched her stomach tighter, shielding the child from John's piercing gaze. "Clara," he demanded again, sharper now, "I deserve the truth. Did you betray me?" Her voice broke as she whispered, "John, I never stopped loving you." "That is not an answer." His tone cracked like a whip. She flinched, but forced herself to meet his eyes. "You were gone. Always gone. I was alone in this house, alone in this marriage, while you built your empire brick by brick." And one night, her voice faltered, trembling on the edge of confession. "One night I was weak." John turned fully now, his eyes blazing, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. "Weak." His voice thundered louder than the storm. "You call betrayal weakness?" Her tears spilled over, her voice desperate. "It wasn't planned. It wasn't what I wanted. But I was drowning in silence, John. I reached for someone who offered me a hand, even if only for a moment." The words struck him like blows. He moved closer, his shadow engulfing her as he stood over her trembling frame. "Tell me who," he demanded, his voice a growl. Clara shook her head violently, sobs racking her chest. "No, please don't make me say it. It won't change anything. It will only destroy us further." John's jaw tightened, his breath sharp and uneven. He had faced ruthless rivals, watched men crumble in boardrooms, but nothing had prepared him for this battlefield. The war waged inside his own home. The fire crackled weakly, casting their shadows against the wall. A man torn between love and rage. A woman cradling a secret too dangerous to speak aloud. Finally, John stepped back, his voice cold, controlled once more. "You've made your choice clear." Clara's heart seized. "No, John, please." But he raised a hand, silencing her. His eyes, dark with fury, no longer searched her for answers. They condemned her. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice like stone, "the world will know where we stand. And so will you." He turned sharply, striding toward the door, his footsteps echoing through the cavernous room. Clara collapsed to her knees, sobs racking her as the storm outside thundered its applause to tragedy. But as she clutched her stomach, whispering promises to the child within, one thought consumed her above all others. The truth has only begun to break, and when it fully shatters, none of us will survive untouched. The storm still raged when John Williams retreated to his study, slamming the heavy oak door behind him. The sound echoed through the mansion like a cannon shot, final and unforgiving. He dropped into his leather chair, his chest heaving as though he had run a mile. His hands, usually steady when signing contracts worth millions, now trembled as they curled into fists on the polished mahogany desk. "Weakness," he muttered bitterly, tasting the word Clara had used like poison on his tongue. The fire in the study was nearly out, casting the room in shadow. Lightning flared outside the tall windows, revealing shelves of ledgers, files, and contracts. The empire he had built from nothing. Every object in the room was a testament to discipline, control, triumph. Yet none of it offered him comfort tonight. He poured himself a measure of scotch, the amber liquid catching the brief light of another lightning strike. He swallowed it in one burning gulp, but the fire in his throat was nothing compared to the inferno inside his chest. Clara's words echoed in his mind. "I never stopped loving you. One night I was weak. One night. Just one. But that was enough." He thought of Dr. Everett, the way the man's expression had darkened during the ultrasound. "The warning still rang in his ears, Mr. Williams, for your own sake. You must divorce her." John had dismissed the advice at first. He had assumed it was a mistake, a medical concern, something clinical. But now he saw it for what it was, a quiet confirmation of betrayal. Yet even as rage consumed him, another voice whispered beneath the fury. A quieter voice. A voice he hated. What if she's telling the truth? What if it was only one night, born of loneliness, not malice? What if the child is mine? His hand tightened around the glass until he thought it might shatter. The possibility gnawed at him. Relentless, cruel. John rose abruptly and strode to the window. The rain streaked down the glass like tears he refused to shed. In the reflection, he hardly recognized himself. His dark eyes hollow. His jaw clenched so tight it ached. He remembered the first time he saw Clara. A charity gala 6 years ago. She had been radiant in a sapphire gown, her laughter soft but genuine, unlike the polished, artificial smiles of the other guests. She had been light in a world of masks, and he had wanted her with a hunger he had never felt before. For years, he believed she was his anchor, the one pure thing untouched by the ruthless world of business. And now she was the storm tearing everything apart. John turned from the window, pacing the length of the study like a caged predator. His mind whirled with decisions. Divorce her and protect his empire, his reputation, his heart. Forgive her and risk raising a child who might not be his. Expose the truth and risk destroying them both. He downed another glass of scotch, the warmth doing nothing to steady his racing thoughts. At last, he sank into his chair again, pressing his fingers to his temples. The night stretched long, the storm outside finally beginning to fade, leaving only silence heavy enough to crush him. By the time dawn light seeped into the room, John Williams had made a decision. It was not the one Clara or anyone would expect. The morning sun crept reluctantly over the city, its pale light filtered by the heavy curtains of John Williams' mansion. The storm had passed, but inside the walls of the estate, another storm brewed, quieter, colder, far more dangerous. John had not slept. His suit jacket lay crumpled across the arm of a chair, his tie abandoned on the floor. He had spent the long hours pacing the study, drinking more than he should, replaying Clara's words until they became a refrain of betrayal in his skull. When his phone buzzed at 7:15 a.m., he answered before the second ring. Mr. Williams came the calm, practiced voice of Harold Green, his lawyer of 10 years. You asked me to call early. Yes, John said, his voice gravelly from whiskey and exhaustion. I need to know what happens if I end my marriage. There was a pause, long enough to feel deliberate. And how, sir? Legally? Divorce, John said flatly. On the other end of the line, Harold's tone shifted into something clinical, efficient, but edged with caution. You have a prenuptial agreement, of course. Financially protected. But the optics. Optics, John muttered, his lip curling. Always optics. You are a public figure, sir. A divorce this sudden, so early in pregnancy. Harold hesitated. It would invite questions. Some may even suspect you of wrongdoing. John's jaw tightened. The irony stung. He was the betrayed one, yet the world might cast suspicion on him. Harold continued, If you want my advice, I suggest waiting until after the birth. Quiet investigation, private DNA testing. If the child isn't yours, then you proceed. The sympathy will be yours, not hers. John's silence stretched, heavy and dangerous. Harold cleared his throat. Of course, sir, it depends on your personal feelings. John ended the call without replying. An hour later, he stood in Dr. Everett's office. The physician's clinic was discreet, tucked away from the public, the sort of place where secrets were both discovered and buried. Dr. Everett himself looked weary, his spectacles perched low on his nose, his gray hair untidy as though the night storm had rattled him too. You read the scan, John said, his voice firm. You saw something. Tell me directly, without riddles this time." The doctor folded his hands, his expression grave. "Mr. Williams, I will speak plainly. The growth pattern of the fetus suggests conception at a time that does not align with your travels. I checked twice to be sure. Biologically, it is improbable that you are the father." The words landed like hammer blows. John's chest tightened, but he forced his face into stone. "Improbable," he repeated coldly. "Not impossible." Dr. Everett inclined his head, reluctantly. "Science allows for margin, yes. But if I were to bet my reputation—" "You already did," John cut in sharply. His tone left no room for further comment. The doctor adjusted his glasses. "Sir, I warned you because I've seen what deception does to families. If you stay in this marriage, you risk not only your legacy, but your health. Stress like this, it corrodes a man." For a moment, John considered snapping back. But the man's words struck too close to truth. His empire had been built on control, and now control was slipping from his hands. He rose without another word, his coat swinging over his shoulders. Outside, the sky had cleared to a cruel blue, the world moving on as if nothing had shattered. John Williams walked back to his car, his expression unreadable. He had heard his lawyer. He had heard his doctor. Both urged him to sever ties, to protect himself. But John was not a man who followed advice. He was a man who made his own rules, and the decision forming in his mind would defy them all. The mansion had never felt so cavernous. Clara moved through its hallways as if they were corridors of judgment, each portrait on the wall a pair of watching eyes, each clock tick a reminder of borrowed time. John had left before breakfast, his usual ritual of coffee and the newspaper abandoned. The silence he left behind was deafening. She had called his name once softly at the top of the staircase, but the only answer was the hollow echo of her own voice. Now she sat at her vanity, the morning light spilling across her reflection. Her face looked pale, her eyes swollen from tears, her lips cracked from whispering prayers through the night. She touched her stomach, the small swell of life beneath her palm, and for the 1000th time, she wondered if her unborn child would be her salvation or her ruin. The phone rang suddenly, startling her. She reached for it with trembling fingers. "Mrs. Williams?" The voice belonged to Mrs. Harding, the housekeeper. "Mr. Williams called. He said he won't be home for lunch. He asked that you not wait for him." Something inside Clara faltered. "Did he say where he was going?" "No, ma'am. Just that he has business." Business. The word tasted bitter. Business had been his excuse for years. Late nights at the office, missed anniversaries, unanswered calls. But now it carried a heavier weight, as though business meant something far more final. After the call, Clara drifted aimlessly through the rooms. She ended up in the nursery, still unfinished, walls painted a gentle ivory, a rocking chair by the window, stacks of unopened boxes filled with baby clothes and toys she had picked out in secret. She lowered herself into the chair, the wood creaking softly beneath her. Her hand stroked the curve of her stomach, and tears threatened again. "Please, little one," she whispered, "be his. Let me not lose everything." Her mind returned to the night before, the fury in John's eyes, the way his voice had cut her open with every word. She had never seen him so undone, so wounded. He had always been the pillar of strength, the man who faced the world unflinching. And now, because of her, he was broken. The thought made her stomach twist with guilt. But beneath the guilt, a seed of fear had taken root. What if he listened to the doctor? What if he listened to his lawyer? What if he truly means to cast me aside? The idea of divorce chilled her. It wasn't just the scandal, the shame. It was John himself. The thought of losing the man who had once held her as though she were the most precious thing on earth. Despite her mistakes, despite her sins, she loved him still. As the day dragged on, She caught herself pacing the hallways, glancing at the clock every few minutes, waiting for the sound of the front door, the heavy tread of his shoes, the deep timbre of his voice. But John did not return by noon, nor by dusk, nor by the time the grandfather clock in the hall struck midnight. Clara sat alone in the darkened drawing room, the only sound the rain beginning again outside. Her body trembled as she hugged herself tightly, rocking slightly in her chair. It felt as though the mansion itself was holding its breath, waiting for John's return, waiting for the verdict that would decide her fate. And though she could not see him, Clara knew one thing with bone-deep certainty. John was no longer weighing his choices. He was preparing to act. The key turned in the front door just past 9 the next evening. Clara, who had been dozing restlessly on the drawing room sofa, shot upright at the sound. Her heart pounded against her ribs. She smoothed her hair with trembling fingers and rose to her feet just as John stepped inside. He looked immaculate as always. The storm of the previous night seemed erased from his expression, but the absence of emotion was worse than anger. His tailored suit was unwrinkled, his tie perfectly knotted, his dark hair slicked back into place. Only his eyes betrayed him, cold, unreadable, like polished obsidian. "John," Clara whispered, moving toward him. "I was so worried." He set his briefcase down with deliberate care and removed his coat. "Worry doesn't suit you," he said evenly. His tone was polite, almost detached. Clara stopped a few steps away, uncertain. "You didn't come home last night. I thought." Her voice cracked, and she steadied herself. "I thought you left me." His gaze flicked to her stomach before returning to her face. "If I were leaving, Clara, I wouldn't vanish like a thief. You'd know." She swallowed hard. "Then what is happening?" John crossed the room, poured himself a glass of scotch, and took a measured sip before answering. "What's happening is simple. We're having dinner tomorrow evening, here, in the dining room, 7 o'clock sharp." Clara blinked. The words sounded ordinary, yet something about the precision of his delivery unsettled her. "Dinner?" "Yes," he said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "A proper dinner. You'll wear something fitting, elegant, timeless." His gaze lingered on her, sharp as a blade. "No costumes of innocence, Clara. No masks. Just you." Her mouth went dry. "And who else will be there?" John's lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile, one that sent a shiver down her spine. "Guests. People whose presence will make the evening memorable." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. The way he said memorable carried the weight of judgment, as though the dinner would be more trial than celebration. Clara felt her knees weaken. "John, please." She reached for him, her fingers brushing the sleeve of his jacket. "Don't do this to me. Don't turn our home into a courtroom." He set his glass down with a sharp click and stepped closer, his height towering over her. "Clara," he said softly, dangerously, "you turned our marriage into a battlefield the moment you let another man touch you." Her breath caught. Tears threatened, but she held them back. "I told you it was one mistake, one night." "And tomorrow," he interrupted, "we'll see what one night is worth." He left her standing there, rooted in fear, as he ascended the staircase without looking back. Clara clutched the edge of a chair to steady herself. Dinner, guests, judgment. The walls of the mansion seemed to close in around her, heavy with secrets. For the first time since she married John Williams, she wondered if she would survive the night ahead. The dining room had never looked more magnificent. The long mahogany table gleamed beneath the soft golden light of the chandelier, polished to a mirror shine. Crystal glasses sparkled beside porcelain plates rimmed in gold. A bouquet of white lilies sat in the center, their fragrance faint but sharp, like innocence masking rot. Clara descended the staircase slowly, her satin gown trailing behind her like a river of midnight. John had told her to dress elegantly, and she had obeyed. but her hands trembled as she gripped the banister, her heart beating like a trapped bird in her chest. When she entered the room, she froze. 3 figures were already seated at the table. Dr. Everett, Harold Green, and her throat tightened. Margaret Lively, her oldest friend, the one she had not seen in months. Clara's eyes darted to John, who stood at the head of the table, perfectly composed in a black suit, his cufflinks catching the light. His expression was unreadable. "Clara," he said smoothly, gesturing toward the empty chair opposite him. "You look radiant." Her legs nearly buckled beneath her. She managed to take her seat, but every nerve screamed at her that this was no dinner. This was judgment. Dr. Everett cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. Harold's gaze was cool, clinical. Margaret's eyes were wide, darting between Clara and John with growing confusion. A server entered, poured wine, and withdrew without a word. The silence that followed was unbearable. Finally, John raised his glass. His voice was steady, calm, as though he were hosting any other dinner. "To truth," he said, his dark eyes never leaving Clara's, "and to the courage it demands." The others raised their glasses hesitantly. Clara's hand shook so badly she nearly spilled her wine. The first course arrived, seared scallops with a delicate lemon sauce, but Clara could not taste a thing. Her throat was too tight, her stomach twisted. It was John who broke the silence again. "Dr. Everett," he said lightly, "perhaps you'll explain to my wife and her friend why we're all gathered here tonight." Clara's fork clattered against her plate. "John, please." But the doctor's voice cut across hers, low and measured. "Mrs. Williams, your ultrasound raised concerns. Concerns I felt morally obligated to share with your husband." Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. "Concerns? What kind of concerns?" Clara's cheeks flamed. Her eyes burned. "John, don't do this. Not like this. Not in front of them." But John's gaze was merciless. "Why not, Clara? Truth shrivels in the dark. Let's see how it fares in the light." The doctor continued. "The gestational development suggests conception occurred earlier than expected, earlier than Mr. Williams' presence in the country. Statistically, the probability of him being the biological father is slim." Margaret gasped. Harold, ever the lawyer, simply adjusted his tie. Clara's face crumpled. "John." But John leaned forward, his voice silk over steel. "Tell them, Clara. Tell your friend. Tell my lawyer. Tell my doctor. Tell the truth about whose child you carry." Tears spilled down her cheeks. She shook her head violently. "It doesn't matter whose child it is. I love you, John. Isn't that enough?" The room froze. Even Margaret, her eyes wide with horror, couldn't speak. John's expression didn't change, but his next words sliced through the silence like a blade. "No," he said coldly. "It isn't enough." The chandelier flickered faintly, as though even the light itself trembled. Clara's sobs filled the dining room, soft but raw, her tears trailing down her painted cheeks. Margaret reached across the table to grasp her hand, but Clara pulled away, ashamed, her fingers curling into fists. John remained motionless at the head of the table. His glass of wine stood untouched, its surface rippling faintly from the tremor of his steady breathing. Dr. Everett shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Harold, however, looked as if he were watching a chess match, cool and detached, waiting for the final move. At last, John stood. His presence seemed to fill the room, commanding silence. He rested both palms flat on the table, his gaze fixed on Clara with the force of a hammer. "I have thought long and hard about what to do," he said evenly. His voice was low, controlled, but it carried a sharpness that made every ear strain to hear. "My wife has betrayed me. My marriage has been broken not by death, but by deceit. And now I stand at a crossroads." Clara's chest heaved. "John, please don't." He raised a hand, silencing her. "I could divorce you," he continued. "I could strip you of my name, my wealth, and my protection. I could let the world see what kind of woman Clara Williams truly is. Margaret's eyes filled with tears, but she said nothing. John's gaze darkened further, and yet he straightened, lifting his chin. I won't. The room erupted in stunned silence. Clara blinked, confused, her lips parting in disbelief. You won't. No, John said firmly. Divorce would be too easy, too merciful, too ordinary. He paused, his voice thickening with something that was neither love nor hate, but something far more dangerous. Instead, Clara, I will keep you. I will raise this child as my own. I will wear the mask of the devoted husband, and the world will never know the truth. The words hit like thunder. Clara's breath caught. John. But hear me well, he continued, his tone chilling as steel. This is not forgiveness. This is not reconciliation. This is control. From this day on, you live under my roof, under my name, under my watch. But you will never again know freedom. You will never again mistake my silence for weakness. Every moment you breathe will be because I allow it. Clara's tears ran freely now, but her voice broke with defiance. That's not love, John. That's a prison. His lips curved into a cold smile. Exactly. Dr. Everett lowered his eyes, uncomfortable. Harold scribbled something on a notepad, unruffled. Margaret covered her mouth, whispering, My God, Clara. John raised his glass at last, his voice calm, almost ceremonial. To marriage, he said, in sickness and in health, in betrayal and in truth, until death do us part. He drank. No one else moved, and Clara realized in that moment that her fate had been sealed, not in freedom, but in chains woven from vows and vengeance. The dining room emptied slowly, like a theater after tragedy. Dr. Everett left first, his head bowed, murmuring something about wishing them well. But his eyes never met Clara's. Guilt weighed heavy on his shoulders. Harold followed, briefcase in hand, pausing only to nod curtly at John as though business had been concluded. Margaret lingered. She clutched Clara's hand, her own trembling. Clara, you can't live like this, she whispered urgently. You can't stay. Clara's throat tightened. Her mascara had smudged. Her gown clung damp to her skin from tears. Where would I go, Margaret? She asked hollowly. He has everything. The house, the money, even my name. At last, John turned. His expression was calm, almost pleasant, as though the scene at dinner had never happened. Well, he said smoothly. That went better than expected. Clara's mouth fell open. Better? Her voice rose with disbelief. You humiliated me in front of everyone I trust. You told them I betrayed you. I told them the truth. John cut in, his tone sharp but measured. And now the truth is contained. They won't speak of it, Clara. My lawyer is bound by confidentiality, my doctor by ethics, and your friend, he smirked faintly, knows better than to cross me. Clara's blood ran cold. You've thought of everything. Of course, John said simply. He walked toward her, each step deliberate, until he stood inches away. His cologne filled her senses, woody, expensive, suffocating. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. You see, Clara, I don't need to divorce you. I don't need to punish you, because keeping you here, under my name, under my watch, is the punishment. Clara's tears returned, hot and silent. John leaned closer, his voice a low whisper. You'll smile when people look. You'll play the dutiful wife. And no one will ever know that behind closed doors, you're mine and mine alone. He kissed her forehead lightly, almost tenderly, before straightening. Now get some rest. Tomorrow we start fresh. And just like that, he left her in the cavernous room, his footsteps fading up the staircase. Clara sank into the nearest chair, her whole body shaking. For the first time, she realized John's decision hadn't saved her marriage. It had destroyed her freedom, and tomorrow the mask of perfection would begin. The morning sun spilled through the tall bedroom windows, painting the white curtains in warm gold. But for Clara, it felt like bars of light, illuminating, not freeing. She sat on the edge of the bed, still in her nightgown, her hands folded tightly over her small but growing belly. Sleep had been impossible. John's words echoed in her skull like a curse. This is not forgiveness. This is control. The door creaked open. A maid entered quietly, balancing a tray with breakfast, poached eggs, toast, and a glass of freshly squeezed orange juice. "Good morning, Mrs. Williams," the maid said softly, her eyes lowered. "Mr. Williams requested you eat in bed today." Clara wanted to scream. She wanted to hurl the tray across the room, to demand her freedom, to tear down the walls of this prison disguised as luxury. But instead, she forced a brittle smile. "Thank you, Anna. Leave it there." The maid obeyed, bowing slightly before retreating. The door clicked shut, and Clara's smile shattered instantly. She pushed the tray away, the smell of food turning her stomach. She stood and wandered to the window. Below, the estate stretched endlessly, gardens manicured to perfection, fountains spraying arcs of crystal water, guards pacing the grounds like shadows. Beyond the iron gates lay the city, pulsing with life. People walked freely, laughed freely, loved freely. And she was trapped in silence. By mid-afternoon, Margaret called. Clara stared at the ringing phone on her vanity, her heart pounding. At last, she picked it up. "Clara," Margaret's voice came, urgent and breathless. "I can't stop thinking about last night. You can't stay there. I'll help you. Say the word, and I'll come." "No." Clara cut her off quickly. Her eyes darted to the bedroom door, half expecting John to appear. "You don't understand. He'll never let me go. You're not a possession." Margaret hissed. "You're a woman, Clara. You deserve freedom. You deserve love." Clara swallowed hard, her throat raw. "I made a mistake, Margaret. A mistake that cost me everything. And now," she pressed a trembling hand to her stomach, "now I have to think of the baby." Margaret's voice softened. "The baby needs a mother who's free, not a mother living in fear." But before Clara could answer, the line clicked. Silence. She pulled the phone from her ear, staring at it in shock. The call had been cut. Her blood ran cold. Slowly, she turned toward the doorway. And there he was, John, standing in the frame, his hand still on the cord, his expression unreadable. "You'll limit your calls," he said simply, his tone calm but final. "From now on, only family. No friends." Clara's breath caught. "You cut me off?" "I protect what's mine," John replied smoothly. He stepped into the room, his eyes locking onto hers with terrifying intensity. "Remember that, Clara. I don't destroy, I contain. I don't abandon, I keep." He brushed a kiss across her temple, soft as silk, before turning away. "Dinner is at 8. Wear the blue dress. The guests will expect you to shine." The door shut behind him, and Clara realized with chilling clarity that her life was no longer her own. The chandelier above the ballroom sparkled like frozen stars, scattering light across gowns of silk and tuxedos pressed to perfection. A string quartet played in the corner, their notes rising and falling like delicate glass. The city's elite had gathered for the Williams annual charity gala, a night meant to showcase generosity, influence, and elegance. Clara stood at John's side, draped in the blue gown he had chosen. Its fabric shimmered with every movement, hugging her figure in a way that left her feeling both exposed and contained. Her hair was coiled into a sleek chignon, her lips painted the shade John preferred. She looked to the outside world, like the perfect wife of a perfect millionaire. But inside, her lungs screamed for air. "Smile," John whispered as he leaned toward her, his breath warm against her ear. His hand rested lightly on the small of her back, not affectionate, but possessive like a brand. Clara obeyed, her lips curving into a delicate expression of grace. The photographer's flashes ignited across the room, capturing the image of a couple deeply in love. "Mr. Williams, Mrs. Williams," a society reporter gushed, stepping forward with her notepad. "The city thanks you again for your contributions. Your foundation has done wonders for the Children's Hospital. Tell me, what inspires you both to give so generously?" John's arm tightened around Clara's waist. "Family," he said smoothly, his smile effortless. "Every child deserves care. Every mother deserves peace of mind. Isn't that right, darling?" All eyes turned to Clara, her throat constricted. She nodded, forcing her voice steady. "Yes, that's right. Family is everything." The crowd murmured approval. The reporter scribbled happily. But Margaret stood near the edge of the ballroom, her eyes locked on Clara. She saw past the diamonds and the painted smile. She saw the trembling in Clara's hands, the faint redness around her eyes. Later, when the crowd had thinned and the quartet played softer, Margaret seized her chance. She caught Clara near the refreshment table, her voice low but fierce. "You're dying in there, Clara. I can see it. You have to leave him." Clara's glass shook in her hand. "Please," she whispered, glancing around nervously. "Don't say that here. He has eyes everywhere." Margaret's expression hardened. "Then take mine." She pressed a small slip of paper into Clara's palm. "A number. A safe house. No one will know." Clara's fingers closed around it instinctively. The paper burned hot against her skin, a secret hope she hadn't allowed herself to hold. But before she could slip it into her clutch, John appeared at her side. His smile was dazzling, his tone casual, but his eyes burned into her. "Everything all right here?" Margaret returned his gaze, unflinching, just catching up with an old friend. John's arm slid once again around Clara's waist, pulling her flush against him. "Good. My wife has a tendency to tire easily these days. I wouldn't want her overexerting herself." The words were innocuous enough to anyone listening, but Clara heard the edge beneath them, a warning. As the evening wound down and the guests began to leave, Clara slipped into the waiting car beside John. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows, but her mind stayed fixed on the slip of paper hidden in her clutch. For the first time since John's verdict, she had something he couldn't control. A choice, a chance, and Clara knew she would take it, if she found the courage before he discovered it first. The gala had ended, but its echoes followed Clara long after the last guest departed. Back at the mansion, the silence was unbearable. The vast hall stretched endlessly, every marble surface polished to perfection, every portrait of John's ancestors staring down like watchmen. She carried her clutch carefully to her room, her heart pounding with the knowledge of what it contained. The slip of paper, a lifeline, a way out. She locked the door and pulled it free. Margaret's handwriting was quick but steady. A phone number, followed by 2 words, "Safe House." Clara pressed it to her chest, tears brimming in her eyes. For the first time in weeks, she felt something other than despair. She felt hope, fragile, trembling, but alive. She hid the paper inside the lining of her vanity drawer, beneath old scarves John never touched. Then she sat down, forcing herself to breathe. She would need to be careful. The state had eyes everywhere. Maids, drivers, security guards, all loyal to John. Every call she made could be traced, every movement noted. But she had one advantage: John's arrogance. He believed her broken. He believed her contained. That would be his weakness. The following morning, Clara began her act. She smiled faintly over breakfast, complimented the cook, and asked John about his business ventures with a soft attentiveness that made his eyes gleam with satisfaction. "You see," he said proudly, sipping his coffee, "when a man controls his empire, no storm can shake him. It's all about discipline, about keeping every piece in place." Clara nodded, feigning admiration. Inside, her thoughts spun. He thinks he's the king. Then I'll play the queen, silent, graceful, until the moment comes to move. Over the next week, she began preparing in secret. At the library, under the pretense of finding poetry books for the baby's nursery, she slipped a small journal into her handbag. In it, she scribbled coded notes, times the guards rotated, which staff were sympathetic, which exits were least watched. At night, while John slept heavily beside her, she memorized the numbers in Margaret's note, whispering them like a prayer until they burned into her memory. But John's instincts were sharp. One evening, as she closed the journal and tucked it under the mattress, his voice broke the silence. "What are you writing, Clara?" Her heart nearly stopped. She turned to see him standing in the doorway, his silhouette sharp against the lamplight. "Letters," she said softly, praying her voice wouldn't betray her, "to the baby, so that when they grow older, they'll know what I felt before they were born." John stepped inside, his eyes fixed on her. For a long, tense moment, he said nothing. Then he smiled, a slow, dangerous curve of his lips. "That's sweet," he said finally. He brushed a hand over her cheek. "Keep writing. A child should know their mother's heart." Clara nodded, her body rigid, her pulse racing. But as John left the room, she caught the flicker in his gaze. Suspicion. And she knew, with terrifying certainty, that her time was running out. The morning was gray, clouds pressing low over the estate. Clara sat in the conservatory, pretending to read. A book of poetry lay open on her lap, but her mind was on the folded paper hidden deep in her dress pocket. Margaret's number. John was gone for the day. Meetings downtown, he had said, and she knew this was her only chance. Her hands trembled as she reached for the house phone. Her pulse hammered. Every second felt dangerous. She dialed quickly, praying no one was listening, no one tracing. One ring, two, three. A voice answered, a woman's, calm but cautious. "Safe house." Clara's throat tightened. She almost hung up, but then she whispered, "It's me, Clara Williams." The line went silent for a moment. "Then we've been expecting you. Margaret said you might call." Clara closed her eyes, gripping the receiver like it was her lifeline. "I don't have much time. He watches everything. I need a way out." "We'll find one," the woman promised. "You'll need to move carefully. Can you get to the library again? That's where we can make contact." "Tuesday, 3 o'clock. Clara nodded, even though the woman couldn't see her. "I'll be there." She hung up quickly, her heart racing so violently it hurt. For the first time, she had taken a step toward freedom. But freedom has a price. That night, as John returned, Clara played the role of dutiful wife. She poured his bourbon, listened as he spoke of contracts and rivals, laughed softly at his rare jokes. But inside, she counted hours. She thought of Tuesday, of the library, of Margaret's promise. John studied her closely. His eyes lingered too long. His silence stretched too deep. At last, he leaned across the table, his voice low. "You're glowing lately." Clara forced a smile. "It's the baby." John's lips curved, but not into warmth. Of course, the baby changes everything. He didn't believe her. From his office, John reviewed the household logs, calls in and out, deliveries, staff reports. His empire extended beyond boardrooms. It seeped into every brick of his estate. One missed entry caught his eye. A call placed midday from the conservatory. Short, unrecorded. His jaw clenched. Clara was reaching, testing boundaries. And that was fine. He could allow it, for now. The key to control wasn't constant pressure. It was the illusion of freedom. Let her run a few steps, he thought coldly. Let her believe she has a chance. When she discovers the walls again, she'll learn to spare. John leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. In war, timing was everything. And in marriage, This marriage war was exactly what they were waging. Tuesday came like a storm inside Clara's chest. She dressed carefully that morning, choosing a soft cream dress that looked delicate and harmless. She kissed John goodbye at the door, her lips barely grazing his cheek, praying he wouldn't sense her pulse thundering beneath her skin. The library smelled of old paper and varnished wood. It had always been her refuge. Today it was her battlefield. At exactly 3, Margaret appeared between shelves, her scarf tied loosely around her neck. She gave Clara a look sharp with urgency. "This is your chance," Margaret whispered, sliding a folded note into Clara's book. "Don't react now. Just read it later. Burn it after." Clara's hands shook as she tucked the book under her arm. For the rest of her visit, she pretended to study the poetry aisle, though her vision blurred with fear and hope tangled into one. When she returned to the car, John's driver opened the door for her. His face was impassive, unreadable, but Clara couldn't shake the feeling that his eyes lingered a moment too long. That night, in the safety of her bedroom, she read the note. "There will be a car waiting Friday night past midnight at the south gate. One chance only. Be ready." Clara pressed the paper to her lips, tears streaming. Freedom was so close she could taste it, but she knew deep down that John was already tightening his net. The clock ticked past midnight. Clara's hands shook as she fastened her small bag shut. A single change of clothes, a handful of money. Margaret's note folded tight in her pocket. The baby moved inside her restless, as if it knew the weight of this night. She crept through the servants' corridor, every creak of the wooden floor threatening to betray her. Down the stairs, past the cold, empty kitchens, toward the south gate. And there, just as promised, a car idled in the shadows, its headlights dimmed, its driver waiting. Freedom waited only steps away. Clara's throat tightened with relief. She nearly broke into a run, but a voice smooth and low cut the night in half. "Going somewhere, Clara?" Her body locked. From the darkness, John stepped into view. His suit was crisp, his presence towering, his face calm, too calm. The driver froze. Clara's heart slammed against her ribs. "John," she whispered. Did you really think I would know?" he said softly. He didn't raise his voice, but the chill in it made her legs tremble. "Every call you make, every word you whisper, every time you step out of line, I see it all." Clara's tears welled. Her secret life had been an illusion. The walls had never let her out. She turned, ready for his wrath, ready to be dragged back inside, ready for the cage to close. But John didn't move. He only studied her. And then, shockingly, his voice broke. "Do you think I enjoyed this?" His tone was rougher now, strained. "Do you think I wanted to watch you like a prisoner?" Clara blinked, startled. "You." He stepped closer, his eyes glinting not with cruelty, but something else. Fear. "You don't understand, Clara. I wasn't keeping you here to control you. I was keeping you alive." Her lips parted. "Alive?" John exhaled sharply, running a hand down his face. For the first time since she had known him, he looked human, vulnerable. "The doctor didn't warn me about you because of the baby alone," he said. "He warned me because people out there would use you, use the child. They've been watching us since the day you became my wife." Clara shook her head. "That doesn't make sense." "It does," John said, his jaw tightening. "My family has enemies, ruthless ones, men who would slit a throat for leverage. When the doctor saw that ultrasound, he saw something else too. A sign, something that tied back to an old enemy. If word got out, Clara, you wouldn't be here now. You'd be a pawn, or worse, gone." Her breath caught. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him he was lying, manipulating, twisting. But his voice cracked again, low and raw. "I locked you in because it was the only way I knew how to protect you. Not because I don't love you, but because I do." Tears blurred her vision. She staggered a step back, her bag falling to the ground. John reached for her hand, trembling for the first time. "You are not my prisoner. You are my heart. Everything I did to keep you breathing." For the first time, Clara saw no monster in his eyes, no tyrant, no cage, only a man stripped bare by fear of losing the woman he loved. Her body shook with sobs as his hands closed gently around hers. "I was wrong to keep you in the dark," John whispered, "but I will never apologize for trying to save you. If you want to leave, Clara, go. But know that I will die before I let anyone else take you from me." The car's engine purred softly, waiting. The gate stood open. Clara looked at the night, then back at John. The world tilted. Every assumption, every fear, every plan collapsed under the weight of his confession. And for the first time, she wasn't sure if she had been running from him or running from the truth of how deeply he loved her. Clara's knees buckled, and she sank onto the grass beside the fallen bag. Her chest heaved with sobs she had held in for months. The night air was cool, but it burned her skin as though it could cleanse her confusion. John knelt beside her, his hand gentle on her shoulder. "Clara, look at me," he said softly. "Please." She lifted her tear-streaked face. His eyes, dark, stormy, yet tender, bore into hers. She searched them for any deception. There was none, only love, fierce and raw. I thought you hated me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I thought everything you did was to control me, to trap me." John shook his head slowly. "I never hated you. Never. Every rule, every guard, every impossible restriction, it was to keep you alive, to keep the baby alive. The world out there." He gestured toward the shadowed estate, the dark beyond the gates. "It's not safe. Not for you. Not for what we've created." Her mind spun. She remembered the doctor's warning, the ultrasound, the sense of danger she had felt but couldn't place. Now it all clicked. Every harsh word, every cage, every shadow. He had acted from love, not cruelty. Tears slid freely down her cheeks. All this time, I was running from the one person who wanted to protect me. John pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest. "Yes," he admitted. "I love you, Clara, more than life, more than myself, and I would endure every sleepless night, every angry stare, every mistake, if it meant keeping you safe." Her sobs turned into laughter, shaky but real. "You John, you fool," she whispered, pressing her face against his chest. "You scared me to death." "And I'd do again," he said, a faint smile breaking through the tension. "But now you know the truth. Will you forgive me?" Clara pulled back slightly, searching his face. She saw the man she had feared, yes, but beneath it, the man who had loved her so fiercely he risked everything. She nodded slowly. I do. I forgive you." A weight lifted from the night. For the first time in weeks, Clara felt peace. By dawn, the first hints of light touched the estate. The air smelled of wet grass and possibilities. Inside the mansion, the oppressive tension of weeks melted like fog under the rising sun. Clara and John walked together through the gardens, hands intertwined. Not because she was under his control, but because she chose to be by his side. "The baby," Clara whispered, resting her hand on her rounded belly. John kissed it gently. "Our baby," he corrected softly, his voice full of reverence. "And we will raise them together, safe, loved, free." Clara smiled, finally understanding the depth of his devotion. I never imagined that love could be so protective." John pressed his forehead to hers. "Sometimes the world isn't kind to what we cherish, and sometimes we have to fight in ways no one understands, even if it seems cruel. But it was always for you." For the first time, Clara truly believed him, and in that belief, she found strength. They walked through the estate hand in hand, the gates open, the car waiting, not for escape, but for a life together. No secrets, no fear. Even as the sun rose fully, casting gold over their world, Clara knew there would always be shadows lurking. But now she had John, and together they could face anything. As they stood at the edge of the garden, the wind brushing her hair, Clara pressed a hand to her heart. "I'm not afraid anymore," she said softly. John smiled. "Neither am I." And in that moment, the mansion no longer felt like a cage. It was home. A home built not on control, but love, trust, and the courage to protect what matters most.